I never really intended on buying real estate and utilizing it to help me accelerate my retirement. And once I discovered how much it could impact my financial situation, we started buying more and more property.
Today, I'm super excited to be here with Stacey. She's the president and CEO at Kozy Getaways. She's actually a Facebook community leader as well. She started a Facebook group that has grown to 64,000 members. It's called Female Short-Term Rental Investors. She's actually the host as well of a podcast that's called the STR Sisterhood. She hosts a summit as well called the Short-Term Rental Virtual Summit for Women. When was that moment for you that you kind of had that realization of this is more than just money move here?
When I discovered short term rentals and I very quickly fell in love with our industry, I was committed from the start like, okay, this is something that I absolutely love.
You had to unlearn certain things as you were moving, towards becoming an entrepreneur. What was the hardest thing for you to unlearn when you were trying to make that transition and rewire your brain?
What I really feel like I had to do was learn how to control my thoughts, address the negative stories I was telling myself over and over and over in my mind.
What do you see is something that, people in this industry tend to struggle with the most, that you see as a common theme, a common denominator that you wish you could kind of like help address?
I think the biggest mistake that I see is people.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hospitality Edge podcast, where we bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality, and where we aim to bring together entrepreneurs, investors, founders, leaders, and operators in the vacation rental and hospitality space so they can tell us about their stories, the lessons they have learned along the way, as well as maybe some of the mistakes they might have made along the way so we don't have to make those same mistakes ourselves. Today, I'm super excited to be here with Stacey. She's the president and CEO at Kozy Getaways. She's actually a Facebook community leader as well. She started a Facebook group that has grown to 64,000 members. It's called Female Short-Term Rental Investors. She's actually the host as well of a podcast that's called the STR Sisterhood. She hosts a summit as well called the Short-Term Rental Virtual Summit for Women. And she's actually a recent author as well. She's recently published two books, one of them called Leave Big, which is a book for female entrepreneurs. And she also has a book called 90-Day Momentum Maker, which is a daily planner to help readers of the Leave Big book follow along with exercises and journaling. So super excited to have you on, Stacey. Super excited to be chatting with you today, learning more about your background, about your story. We're going to be trying to cover as much as we can, but essentially, we want to talk about team building. We want to talk about delegation. We want to talk about culture. We want to talk about why you think 2025 is the good year for you to get back into buying property, which seems to be what you're in the middle of going back to doing now, buying property creatively and looking at your numbers and thinking of this hosting game as a real business. So those are some of the themes we're going to be covering. That being said, Stacey, why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about, if you were to start all over again, you were to start from scratch all over again with the knowledge that you have today from all the people you've coached and interviewed and the books you've written, and the lessons you've learned from growing your personal portfolio as well to more than 40 properties in full service property management. If you could change anything, if you were to start all over again, what would that be?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and what an awesome intro. Thank you for that. I think if I had to do something over again, I would start investing in real estate much younger. I started investing by accident. I never really intended on buying real estate and utilizing it to help me accelerate my retirement. And once I discovered how much it could impact my financial situation for the positive, we started obviously buying more and more property. So I think if I could go back and do it over again, oh my gosh, I would have done it in my 20s versus in my 40s.
So just start buying real estate sooner. And one of the themes you and I discussed, that we wanted to touch on was this idea of buying property creatively. So, what do you think you could have perhaps learned earlier that would have helped you get started in terms of buying your first real estate property sooner?
Sure.
In terms of what you know today about buying property creatively.
Sure. Well, as we all know, there are multiple benefits of purchasing real estate. One is obviously for the cash flow, the other is for appreciation. And when first started investing in real estate, I was buying straight off the MLS, right? Like so many people do. And I did uh, very early on dive into a lot of lessons and education around real estate investing. So I've always understood that you have to buy right. Right? You make your money on the way in when you acquire a property. And so fast forward to today, I've now had the education and actually collaborate with someone, on a course called the Buy Direct Academy, where we teach people how to buy creatively through different strategies like seller financing, buying subject to an existing mortgage, doing partnerships, all different creative ways to
Mhm.
acquire properties. I would have focused on that earlier on as well, because it really opens up a whole new set of doors, no pun intended, or pun intended, maybe I should say, um, into your real estate investing journey.
Mhm. Absolutely. And if we talk a little bit about, those options that you mentioned. So there's of course, creative financing as in seller financing. There's subject to, for someone that's never done this, or that's interested in trying to go and convince a seller to finance part of the acquisition, or whatnot. What are some of the things that you would recommend or that you teach in the course in terms of like a crash course, 101, you know, k- key things to keep in mind if you're trying to go out this, you were inspired from this podcast and you want to go and try to buy your first property sooner, like Stacey said she would have wanted to do earlier. What would you recommend they do or think about to try to get, seller financing from the seller?
Sure. Seller financing specifically, first of all, I think it would be important to understand what questions to ask them. I think it would be important to have a plan in place about how you want to present yourself as a potential buyer, and is what the seller is going to benefit from by offering seller financing to you. I think it's also important to not test that conversation in real time. So I would absolutely recommend, having questions pre-prepared, that you have actually memorized the questions so you can have a very organic discussion. I think there's also, some challenges sometimes around negotiating with sellers, so I would absolutely practice, again, how you're gonna present offers, practice how you're gonna have a tough negotiation, like, those are all skills that we don't wa well, we can leave to chance. However, when we don't leave them to chance and we're intentional about practice, it can make a huge difference in whether you get that deal or not.
I love it. I love it. That's perfect. So tell us a little bit about that story of yours in terms of how you got started. So from what I understood, about our last conversation, you were doing flips, you were in long-term rentals, and you kind of got to a realization of, the risk, that was involved with, essentially, what happens if someone decides not to pay, there's no recourse there. So that's where you got involved with short-term rentals. Tell us a little bit about when you compare, back then when you were getting started, long-term rentals with short-term rentals. What do you remember being very different and very unique about the asset class of short-term rentals that you were perhaps not expecting?
Well, one of the things, to your point, that I realized during COVID, when we were getting ready to buy yet another long-term rental, when all these eviction moratoriums started popping up, I had some real concern about, okay, well, if we buy another property, to your point, like we are very much exposed as a landlord right now because of, the eviction moratorium. So we pivoted to short-term rentals originally because we thought, well, let's give this a try. Let's see how we like it. Um, and our philosophy was, well, at least somebody has to pay in order to get in the front door,
Mhm.
right? One of the things that surprised me most was that I intended on buying a short-term rental as a financial play, and it absolutely was. What I didn't expect was that I would absolutely fall in love with the industry. And it gives me goosebumps saying that because there is something very impactful about doing work that you love. There's something very impactful about earning purpose-driven paychecks, things that really, really light you up. I have so much joy and fun in what I do every day because I absolutely love what I do, right? But I didn't expect that. I was buying a short-term rental because I was making a pivot because of a financial risk, right? So that my whole world has really changed because of it.
Mhm. Wow. And yeah, I know I agree with you. It's such an industry that's fun where people are open, willing to share. I don't know if there's a lot of industries like that. When was that moment for you that you kind of had that realization of, wow, this is more than just a money move here. There's something here that I really enjoy. And what was it for you that gave you that feeling that, there's more here than just the money play?
Yeah. Well, several of my properties are at the beach, and I live in Ohio. Myrtle Beach, South Carolina is where the majority of my portfolio is. And when we purchased our first 2 short-term rentals, we purchased them at the same time in Myrtle Beach, little teeny condos, less than $100,000. I mean, we did not spend a ton of money. I love buying ugly properties and rehabbing them, so that's what we did, forcing appreciation, of course. And we had done flips, so the rehab process was, it was cool because you could look at the ocean while you're, hanging pictures on the wall. But I think probably where it started really sinking in for me is when I started thinking back about my childhood. My favorite memories of my childhood were on vacation, right? My family took an annual vacation, and oftentimes we would go to the beach, oftentimes we would go to Disney World. So those were our 2 kind of go-to vacations. And the most precious memories to me were from vacation. And I started really thinking about the fact that, oh wow, this is really cool. One morning, my husband and I were taking a walk on the beach, and there was a family at the ocean's edge, and one person in the family was in a beach wheelchair, okay? And you could tell that they were at the end of their life. And I said it to my husband as I was walking by, I said, "Man, that's so sad, right? So sad." And my husband said to me, "But is it? I mean, how cool is it that this family, it's very obvious that this person who is going to leave this earth, it's very obvious that they have a deep connection with the ocean, right? Or there's something that brings them joy about being at the ocean. And how special is it that that family was able to have that moment with them?" And it really, really put perspective on that for me because my own mom passed away, 20 years ago. And even when she was ill with breast cancer, we still planned vacations to try to give her something to look forward to. So that moment really, it really hit home in my heart like, "Oh, wow, there's so much more to this than what I even imagined."
Wow, I'm sorry to hear that, and thanks for sharing. And wow, yeah, that does make you think, about how it can really impact people's lives. I mean, it's memories that are gonna live forever, and you never know how those memories can impact someone's life. So it's a responsibility at the same time as well that you have as as
Mhm.
as as a host, as an operator, because yeah, for us they come and go. There's many guests, but for them it's each one of those is a
Sure.
once in a lifetime sometimes, opportunity to
Yeah.
enjoy time with family and rest and enjoy. And so it just gives you a perspective as well on the responsibility that there is behind hosting people.
Yeah. One of my favorite things to do when I go in my properties is to pull out the guest book and look through the guest book and read what people have to say.
Mm.
And again, it's so fun for me to see the things like, "Hey, we celebrated our honeymoon here. Hey, I got to see my mom for the first time in 15 years during this trip. Hey, my baby took their first steps in your condo." Those types of things are meaningful, and do they ever remember that I was their host? No, it's not about me, it's about them, right? And so, again, I'm just playing this little teeny piece in a grand scheme of lifelong memories that they're making, and again, I'm fine with that little teeny piece. I'll take it any day because it lights me up. I enjoy that.
Mhm, mhm. And we start this episode, well, this podcast really by saying we're bringing together two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality. You and I were talking about how I see these two sides of this industry as kind of like the emotional side of what we do, the logical side of what we do. And it's funny because some people get into this space first with the emotional side, taking the lead in terms of, oh, I'm a hospitable person, I want to host people, I know that that's what I'm passionate about. And then they realize the logical money opportunity that there is as well. In your case, there
Just a
was,
minor detail.
it's a minor detail, right? And then for you, it's almost like, you were coming in as an investment, and then you realize that there was everything else as well.
Mm.
How do you kind of think about the two, right? Because when I ask you, is there one of these two sides that you are more inclined towards, you said, well, no, because I'm in the middle and I have to deal with both. And it's more important to understand that this is a business where both need to be present, the logical side, the emotional side. How do you balance those two sides when you're running your business, and when you're thinking about your role as a leader in the space?
Well, I think what's important first and foremost is to understand that we are running businesses, right? Whether we have one property, 100 properties, or anything in between, a lot of folks, when they start out, call themselves, "Oh, I'm an Airbnb host," or, "Oh, I'm a host of a vacation rental," right? And what I would love for people to start shifting their mindset around is, I am a business owner. I am an entrepreneur, whether you have, again, a portfolio that's small, medium, or large. And so, what's important when we make that mindset shift and we're committing to being a successful business owner, and I talk about this in my book, Commit, Be, Do. That's an operational model. We commit to the things we want to accomplish. We we start being the person that actually makes those commitments come to life, and we do the things that a successful business owner does. Again, whether you have one property or something much, much larger. But I think, again, for me, it's really, really important to commit to providing the very best experience for my guests, and I do that through excellent customer service, through our 24/7 concierge team. I do that by actually being very selective with the properties in my portfolio, and quite candidly, very selective with the owners I work with as well. Um, so we are committed to having world-class experiences for our guests. But as a business leader, I have to commit to being the very best person and showing up for my team. And that on the business side can mean sometimes we have to have tough conversations. Sometimes we have to commit to, pushing our people to strive for more or be better. Um, so I look at it again, it's a parallel path. It's not one or the other. It is a commitment to my guests and a commitment to my team. And when I'm able to deliver the very best me for each of them, I succeed as a byproduct. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I love it. And when was it for you that you clicked in terms of making this mindset shift from doing this as a maybe side investment to committing on wanting to turn this into a business and then becoming that entrepreneur?
Mhm. Well, I had a very successful job in the corporate world. I, checked off all the boxes that a lot of people would say, "Oh, that's great. You've got a paycheck that's hefty. You travel the world, meeting with large clients, and you get to wine and dine them." Like, it was fun, right? But at my core, that work didn't light me up. It didn't make me wake up every morning and go, I'm so freaking excited about my day today, right? When I discovered short-term rentals and I very quickly fell in love with our industry, I was committed from the start, like, okay, this is something that I absolutely love. This is something that I'm going to commit to. I don't have all the answers right now, but I'm going to commit to this was going to be my path out of the corporate world. So I always from the get-go started off seeing this as, "Oh my gosh, I love this. There's so much opportunity here, and this is something that really brings me joy." So I was committed from the start once I discovered that love.
And what did it take for you to then do the second step there, which is becoming, an entrepreneur? Of course, in theory, right? You are an entrepreneur from the moment that you have your LLC or whatever, or the moment that maybe you quit your W-2 or whatever. But did it take some time for you to become, from a mindset perspective, an entrepreneur? And was there anything different, for you in terms of how you had to be thinking about things when you were an employee versus when you became an entrepreneur per se?
Well, sure. Well, as we both know, there is a vast difference between an employee mindset versus an entrepreneurial mindset. I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. Okay. I've always uh, maybe been akin to having a passion for a business. But one of the things that really was a pivotal moment for me as I was trying to figure stuff out, right? Trying to figure out, "Okay, how am I gonna do it all? How am I gonna, you know, make enough money? How what is that gonna look like?" I actually discovered a podcast while I was walking on the beach, podcast episode with a gentleman by the name of John Asseroff, and I write about him in my book a lot. But through that podcast, I discovered the ability to rewire our brains. And you might go like, "Wow, that's really weird, Stacey. That sounds totally woo-woo." And it is. But I will share with you, I did a lot of self-study. I did a lot of work on myself each and every day. I continue to do that work each and every day where I'm really continuously looking to improve myself as a business leader, as a woman, as a human, as a mom, as a wife. Am I perfect? Heck no. Heck no. Do I still make mistakes? Absolutely. Do I still have to have tough conversations with people? Yep, I do sometimes. But I've made a decision and a choice that I'm choosing joy. I am choosing positivity. I am choosing to do what I love to do. Um, and that mindset, when I commit to that mindset, then um, everything kind of falls into place. So every day I am intentionally, and again, that's what I do in the 90-day momentum maker, intentionality about what I'm focusing my energy on, what I'm putting into my mind. If we wanna change the output, we have to change the input of our minds as well. So, um, I don't know if that answered your question,
Yeah, yeah,
Sure,
yeah,
but
yeah. No, so from that perspective, you had to rewire something internally to make that transition, and that rewiring, potentially implies having to unlearn certain things, right? Maybe you had certain tendencies, certain habits, certain things that you were doing despite having the entrepreneurial spirit. You had
Mhm.
to unlearn certain things as you were moving towards becoming an entrepreneur. What was the hardest thing for you to unlearn, when you were trying to make that transition and rewire your brain like you mentioned?
Well, I don't know that I had to unlearn anything. What I really feel like I had to do was learn how to control my thoughts
Mm,
and learn how to address the negative stories I was telling myself over and over and over in my mind. So, limiting beliefs are one of the most impactful things that can keep us stuck, right? Whether we're in a corporate job or whether we're at a certain level in our own businesses, we all have this belief system that is ingrained in our subconscious mind, right? So when I started understanding how the subconscious mind works and putting tools in my own toolbox to help, again, rewire that subconscious mind, um, things started to change, right? Your whole outlook starts to change. Learning to understand in the moment when my limiting beliefs were coming out, that was huge for me. So I
mhm,
had to learn to recognize that. So being extremely reflective. Um, Again, I did brain exercises every morning. Like, I know that sounds really weird. It's really weird, but I did. I did. I still do. I still do visualizations. I still do meditations. I still do journaling. I still so it's for me it's not you learn it once and then you put it away on a shelf. No, you continuously move forward, relentless continuous improvement.
mhm. What was the biggest limiting belief that you had to battle with that you were able to overcome, but that it took you a lot of mental, work to overcome?
That's such a good question. I think probably the biggest limiting belief is that I couldn't do it, right? I didn't have the confidence, and for years, I relied on confidence coming from the outside in. So, I would look to my mom to give me confidence, I would look to someone else to give me confidence, I would look to an achievement in order to give me confidence. What I learned to do was build confidence from within. And when I learned to build confidence from within, I no longer had to rely on those external factors. And even when something doesn't go my way, even when a situation does come up that is tough or I mess something up, right? Again, it's not about being perfect. It's about understanding, okay, I am still going to have failures and I'm gonna fail forward. I'm gonna take the situation, whatever it is, I'm gonna solve that problem, whatever it is. I'll create a process to keep that situation from happening again, right? So doing the tactical things, but not letting my own self-worth be jeopardized in the middle.
Hmm. And confidence from within. How does one develop confidence from within? Like if you were telling someone, or coaching someone that's struggling with a similar, limiting belief about not believing that they can do something, that they can, take the leap of faith and whatnot. How would you advise they go about developing confidence from within?
Well, it comes from multiple things, but one of the things that is so incredibly important is loyalty and loyalty to yourself. So, oftentimes, we all have goals that we want to accomplish, or we all say, okay, I'm going to go to bed earlier, or I'm going to eat more vegetables, or I'm going to stop drinking so much coffee. But we don't actually follow through on the things we're saying to ourselves,
Hmm.
right? So, the first thing you have to do is be loyal to your own word for yourself. So, if you say something, you best well do it because you are actually training your mind whether or not to trust your word. And when you can't trust your word, you can't have self confidence from within. So you have to be loyal to yourself, follow through on what you say you're going to do to yourself, and you start to build confidence. The other thing that I think is so important is to create new habits. And again, our habits really are a foundational element to our outcomes. So you also start to build confidence by improving your habits, one step at a time. Um, Another thing that I think is so important, which I think so many people miss the boat on, is celebrating progress. A lot of people celebrate big wins like, oh my gosh, I just launched a property, or oh my gosh, I just got this property under contract, which is awesome. Great. Celebrate those wins, but also celebrate the fact that you made a mistake yesterday and you put a new process in place today. Celebrate the fact that you didn't know something yesterday, but you figured it out today. And so often it's those micro steps, those little things that make such a huge difference. But when we don't take a moment to recognize our progress, it all gets swept under the carpet.
Hmm. Wow, I love what you said there. Just starting by, yeah, if you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, then it's almost like whatever you tell yourself you're going to want to do, or at some point it's like you no longer believe it. It happens so much that people are like they've lost faith in themselves, so they don't even try anymore because they have proven to not be loyal with themselves in the past. So how do you break that
Yes.
loop, right?
And the thing that is so important, and again, what I learned from that one podcast I was telling you about, was your brain is like a computer. Okay. It stores information. Your subconscious mind does not have logic. Okay. It is a computer, it is a database, and it is storing all the times you said you were going to do something and you didn't do it. That's just storing the information. And so, what do you think controls the majority of our beliefs and our thoughts? It's our subconscious mind. So, when all of that information, that lack of trust in yourself gets stored as a database in there in your subconscious mind is also looking for efficiency. So, it's just repeating the same things over and over and over and over again for efficiency because it wants to keep your body as efficient as possible. So I know I'm getting really like deep in the weeds with brain stuff, but it's so huge because the m- you're y- in order to start training your brain that you are a person of um that is worthy of confidence, right? You have to start that input into your subconscious mind. And you start that input into the subconscious mind by doing what you say you're going to do.
Mhm,
Period.
mhm. Wow, that's so powerful. Yeah, so it comes back to that idea of not focusing too much about outputs and outcomes that you cannot necessarily control. Rather focus on controlling what you can control, which is your inputs, and then things can tend to take care of themselves. Let's talk a little bit about that mindset from the context of you being a leader. One of the things you said you're very passionate about is team building, culture building, and we know how fundamental people and culture and team are to any business, but particularly the hospitality business as well. How do you think of your role as a leader in the context of helping your team members perhaps go beyond just training related to you know the job that they have to do, but
Yeah.
rather, some of these things that, go further than just, the jobs that need to be done.
Yeah. Well, I think it's so important to understand the passions of our team members, right? I think it's so important to understand what lights them up. As a leader, I want to develop them personally and professionally, but I also want to be giving them work that they enjoy. And so I think, again, having conversations with them about the things that are are activities that they love to do and understanding the activities that you are giving to them that they can't stand, right? I think is so important as a leader. I think it's so important to um, set a good example, be a good role model for them. But I believe one of the biggest things that we can do for our team members when it comes to leading is being a good listener and removing roadblocks. So again, a lot of people think of leadership or, oh, I'm their boss. Like, I don't look at my team at all like I'm their boss. Like, no way, right? I look at them like it is my job to coach them. It is my job to mentor them. It is my job to help them del further their own skills and what they're passionate about, and it is my job to remove roadblocks for them. So if they are experiencing a challenge, it's my role to understand what that challenge is and bring solutions to the table to remove those roadblocks if I can. Now, sometimes, if we have a guest that, you know, we can't control other people. So we can only control if a guest is a roadblock and a given my concierge team member an attitude, I can't control that, right? But what I can do is maybe give them some resources for how to, diffuse a situation or how to deal with, stress after an interaction like that. So, um, I consider, understanding where their passions are, listening to them, and further developing them, and then also removing roadblocks as my job as a leader.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And let me know if this has ever happened to you, with someone from your team, where you see potential in them, but they don't see potential in themselves. And then,
Oh,
when how do you know when to stop fighting for them? Because at the same time, you cannot, you know what I mean? It has to come from them too. You can see the potential in them, but if they don't see it in themselves and they're not willing to do the work, the mental work for them to believe it, how do you know when,
mhm,
as a leader, is also, the point to kind of like give up on someone?
mhm. Well, that's a good question. I do tend to have a knack for seeing potential in people before they can see it in themselves. So, something that you mentioned is so important if they're willing to put in the work. Because so many times people will say, "Oh, I wanna do this," or "I wanna do that," or "I wanna achieve this in life." But they don't ever look in the mirror and go, "Oh, well, who's the person that can make that happen?" It's staring back at them in the mirror, right? And so what I have found is oftentimes I will nudge for a while. If I see potential in someone, first I wanna understand again what their passions are, what lights them up, what they wanna do, what their goals are. And I will nudge them, with love, but nudge them to level up or make recommendations. Hey, you said you wanted to do this, but what I'm seeing is something different. Why is that happening? Right. So hold them accountable. Um, I will share with you, I have definitely had experiences where I've seen potential in someone and given them additional responsibility and they didn't deliver. And I think that's so important to also recognize that I don't ever give up on anyone, but you might shift their responsibility, right? Now, if you find that they're not a good fit for your team or no longer in alignment with what you want for your business, that's a different story. I have definitely had team members where I've given them additional responsibility because I see their potential. I see that they have the skill set and the capacity to do it. But if they don't see that in themselves, then I will shift responsibilities, if that makes sense. So,
Mhm,
it's giving people the benefit of the doubt, but if they don't deliver, you don't keep them in a role where they're not delivering. You
mhm,
pivot.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, but as you said, you gotta see that they're willing to put in the work and not just say they want the outcome, but are not willing to
Say they're gonna
put
put in
in
the
the
work.
input. Yeah, 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 for sure, for sure. Now let's talk a little bit about something else here, which is your ability to manage your time. I'm super intrigued, with everything you have going on. You have a full service property management operation with more than 40 properties that's active, that's ongoing. And how have you managed to balance that, which is hard enough in and of itself, with building your personal brand, the podcast, the community, the coaching, the books? How do
I
you
know I
think
sound
about
crazy, don't I?
how do you yeah how do you think about your time, where to spend it, where to delegate? Yeah, what's your time
Yeah.
management secret?
Yeah. Well, I don't know that I have secrets, but I am very much a huge fan of time blocking. I find it incredibly important. Um, as we spoke a little earlier before we pushed record, batching types of tasks is so incredibly helpful. Um, I also am pretty good at delegation. I have always, from the start, understood that I have a specific genius zone, and that genius zone is not in a lot of places, right? So I really like to focus my time and energy on, again, things that I enjoy doing, but also things that I'm good at. If I'm not good at it and I don't enjoy doing it, I'm gonna delegate it to someone else. And so I do have, amazing team members who I have the ability to delegate many, many things to, and I could not do the volume of things that I do without having an amazing team. So it's really the team that helps me execute on everything. Um, I in no way, shape, or form take all the credit.
Yeah, no, and that's something that a lot of leaders have in common, right? In terms of they recognize the role, the crucial role that their team plays in their success. Yet, you know, most operators, I would say, don't have their operation plus the 67,000 people Facebook group, plus the podcast, plus the book. So clearly you've done something right. Perhaps it's about the delegation. Let's talk a little bit about that, because I feel like a lot of people get stuck in doing the thing, uh, maybe because they think that no one will be able to do it just like them, maybe because they get caught up in the idea of I cannot afford it, I cannot afford to delegate, I need to save those dollars. So how did you get out of that trap you know sooner than most?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people have I go back to commit, be, do. Okay. A lot of people operate by a principle that's called have, do, be. So I'm going to have a certain level of success, and then I'm going to do the things that a successful business owner does, and then I'll be a successful business owner. Okay. And what that means is I have to do everything myself first. And then I'm gonna do the things that someone successful does, and they hire people. So they do all the work themselves first, and then they hire people, and then they spend their time training the people. And then eventually I can sit back and eat bonbons and I'll be a successful business owner, right? That is the have do be principle. My principle is very different. So I'm committing up front. This is what is happening. There's no trying. I think trying is one of the even though try is a three-letter word, I feel like it's a four-letter word. So I don't try. I don't try. Okay. I'm committing to something or I'm not committed to it. But if I'm committing to something, I'm going to invest in it. So I very early on invested in my business. I invested in myself, right? I took all kinds of coaching and self-development and programs to make the opportunity for me to be my best self, that much greater, but I also invested early on in people. So it's not just my team, you asked about how do I do both things? Well, I have teams on both sides of my businesses, right? So I don't just have property management and I don't just do everything myself on the other side of my business. I have teams over there too. So very early on, I recognized, again, if I'm looking to grow a sustainable business that I can get wide or fat with, I think about a fat organization. It's the only time I like calling myself fat. Um, but you have to build the infrastructure first, and that's what I focused my time on first, building the infrastructure to my business, securing the people. Um, I hired people way before I could afford them, like, very much so, and I had to be creative in how I hired them. So if I didn't have, you know, income coming in from a salary perspective, or I couldn't offer someone a certain level of, hours per week at this hourly rate, I would be creative in what that business relationship looked like. Until you evolve. And again, as you grow and evolve, then you become more financially stable to be able to um, have more overhead, shall we say, when it comes to team. So I think, again, recognizing what I was good at, recognizing that very early on, I have to commit to, if I want to commit to this business, I have to have people around me. Um, I don't, and
Yeah.
I think it's so important because so many entrepreneurs do everything themselves, and what are they doing? They're creating another job and they're creating burnout.
It's so interesting, right? Because that's basically this whole dilemma of over hiring, being overstaffed, understaffed. This is basically what you're balancing with as you're scaling in the organization. But then it's like, as you said, being willing to say, you know what, I'm going to bring in these resources. Maybe I cannot afford them, but I'll get creative. That's super interesting. So what are some examples of what getting creative could look like in terms of bringing in resources and help, before you can, you know clearly afford it. Maybe offering some kind of a variable structure in the compensation. Anything else that you've kind of experimented
Yeah.
with when it comes to this?
Um, well, I think again, sitting down and understanding from a team perspective what your team members are looking for is really, really important. So, my first hire on my property management side of my business was I brought in a co-host to help me manage. At the time, I had 3 properties, okay? Um, and I brought her in from the get-go, and again, her revenue was based on my revenue, so she
Mhm.
earned a commission or a fee, based on the amount of revenue I had, and her role, again, was to be guest facing, do revenue management, things like that, and my role was to triage issues if I needed to bring maintenance in. Um, so that is, I think, a very common scenario where you are, hiring someone based on a variable rate of pay due to the, how well the portfolio is doing. Another way that you can look at this is incentive-driven compensation. So we wanna incentivize the behavior that we want out of our team. So, again, if we're looking at sales, I have people that do business development that are commission only. They don't get a base salary or an hourly wage. Um, I incentivize that by actually paying a very hefty commission when they do bring on a new client. But If I don't have the revenue to pay a base salary, if I don't have a revenue to pay an hourly wage for them to spend 50 hours doing business development activities to get one sale, I need to incentivize the behavior of bringing in a sale. So I need to do that through a very healthy commission structure. So again, it might be uncomfortable from the start. It might be, "Ooh, gosh, I would never wanna give up X percentage. That I need that revenue," right? But at the end of the day, 100% of nothing is nothing. If I get 50% of something, that's 50% more than I had yesterday, right? So I think it's all in the way that you look at that approach. So I think incentive-based compensation is important. Thinking outside the box and doing commission only is another way. You can also do incentive-based compensation based on performance. So you think about our cleaners or our turnover teams, our inspectors. What are ways that we can incentivize better behavior? Well, we can provide bonuses for when, we get a set of good reviews. I don't give bonuses on individual reviews. I give bonuses when we have a stretch. Um, that way, again, we're continuing to incentivize. Hey, if I get to 10 reviews, I'm getting a bonus. If I get to 10 5-star reviews, I'm getting a bonus. Well, if number 8 comes along and we get a 3-star, oh, sorry, we're starting back at the beginning, right? So again, being creative about the way you're putting together your compensation structures, I think is important if we're starting out without having gobs of cash sitting around us.
Yeah, no, I love it, and I think one of the things too is, with people that are not able to start doing this because they don't see the value. They rather save the money, they rather do the thing even if it prevents them from doing other things. Is I'm not sure they've done the exercise of understanding what's their opportunity cost. What's the opportunity
Mhm.
cost of them, doing something else? I would assume in your case you've been very thoughtful and strategic about where you spend your time because you were very clear of what was your zone of genius, and you knew that your zone of genius is where your time was going to have, the best return.
Yeah.
But what can you tell people that maybe haven't done that exercise of recognizing what their zone of genius is, and recognizing what the opportunity cost might be of them doing certain things, which, on paper it looks like they're saving money, but, in reality, once you consider the opportunity cost of what else they could be doing with that time, they're actually losing
Yeah.
money.
Yeah, I mean, time is our most precious commodity, right? Money is certainly something that I am not here to say you should just go out and frivolously spend money. I'm not saying that. However, we can always be creative about ways to find money or ways to generate money. We cannot generate more time unless we are being more strategic about how we're spending our time. Um, when when you mentioned, people don't want to hire because they want to save the money, in my mind, it goes back to mindset. That is a scarcity mindset around money. I choose to have an abundance mindset around money. And you might go, "Well, what do you mean?" Well, if I'm always nervous, if I'm always in save mode, if I'm always like, "Oh, there's never gonna be enough money," what kind of energy, again, are we attracting? And number 2, what are we telling our brain? That we don't have enough money. And then we start acting like we don't have enough money. If we have an abundance mindset, if we can make that shift to have an abundance mindset and look at things differently, look at yourself as a magnet for money, look at yourself as someone who attracts money, and money is simply a tool that is traded. If we're just collecting more of those trades, it puts a different shift on things. And so, or different perspective on things. So I think really understanding your mindset around money is incredibly important. And I will say the first thing, like I'm not perfect at this. It's not like one day you just flip a light switch and you're just perfect at all of this. Like, I still to this day catch myself, "Okay, that's a scarcity mindset around money, Stacey. Why are you thinking like that?" So again, I have these I have conversations with myself, right? When I recognize it. One of the things I've gotten good at is recognizing when I'm running negative loops in my mind, or if I say something negative, I can catch it in the moment. Whereas before, it was just on autopilot, right?
Wow, that's powerful. Very, very powerful. Now, what do you think when you think about all the people you've interviewed, and also the people you've coached and you've spoken with, interacted with in your Facebook group? What do you see as a common mistake? What do you see is something that, people in this industry tend to struggle with the most, that you see as a common theme, a common denominator, that you wish you could kind of like help address, at large?
I think the biggest mistake that I see is people execute before strategy. So they execute and then they'll say, "Oh, I'll figure it out,"
Hmm.
right? I subscribe to a strategy first approach, whereas before we execute, we have to understand the strategy. And by understanding the strategy, we have to build it, right? So, again, I talk about this in my book a lot, but our behaviors, everything we do every day has to be aligned with our target outcomes, okay? In order to get the results that we want to achieve, we need to have strategy, skills, and systems. But the strategy comes first before we focus on the skills, the systems. What do I need to go execute? So, again, if we bring this back to the world of real estate, somebody says, "I want to buy a new vacation rental or a new short term rental. I'm so excited. I want to be at the beach." And again, I love the beach. So I'm going to use that as an example. So, what do? They break out their computer and they start just searching Zillow. What can we find? Oh my gosh, this is the cutest house on the ocean. It is so perfect. It's right within my budget. This would just be so adorable on Airbnb, right? And they go into execution mode and they don't take a step back first to number one, analyze the market, analyze the deal, think, does this deal and this market align with my bigger goals for my portfolio? What are my goals for my portfolio? What do I want out of my portfolio? Taking it, a step back and a step back and a step back and starting first with what do we want to accomplish, right? Before we go into execution mode and building a strategy so that you're actually intentionally achieving what you want to accomplish. Most people just go straight into execution.
Mm. And so when it comes to strategy, the components of strategy as you see it are: one is the destination, right?
Mhm.
What else is part of building a strategy other than the
Yeah.
destination?
Well, again, we have to have that target outcome. What are we looking to achieve? Um, what are 3 to 4 key focus areas that I need to really, really hone in on in order to make this outcome come to life? Okay. And then within those key focus areas, what are groups of initiatives? Like, what do I'll just give you a real example. A lot of people say, "I want to increase my revenue." Okay. Well, okay, great. Well, we need to be very specific about that target outcome. So, what percentage do we want to increase our revenue by? Let's say it's 20%. Okay. Well, some key initiatives or key focus areas, rather, for increasing revenue by 20% could be in the world of short term rentals. Maybe I need to increase the size of my portfolio, number one. Maybe it's growing or acquiring properties, property acquisition. Um, Maybe I need better revenue management. Maybe I need better reviews, right? So within property acquisition, what are some key initiatives that I need to focus on in order to acquire more properties? Well, I might need to go out and network more. I might need to have a better marketing campaign or marketing strategy about, property acquisition. I might need a better sales funnel, right? I might need better closing tactics. I'm making these things up, right? But you get the drift. Um, the next thing about revenue management. All right. So we've got revenue management as a focus area. What goes into that? Well, I might need better software or better tools, right? For revenue management. I actually might need an expert. So I need to bring in somebody who knows how to manage revenue instead of me just like winging it. I might need better reporting so that I am looking at that revenue and driving the direction versus just letting it happen. I'm sharing this as an example, but it's really taking the big picture, whittling it down into some chunks, if you will, breaking those chunks down into smaller initiatives, and then saying, all right, I need a better revenue management tool. So then you take the daily actions. What am I going to do today to find a new, better revenue management tool? Well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to spend 30 minutes researching revenue management tools. Okay.
Mhm.
And so our actions are based on the things that we've already laid out as the initiatives, the focus areas. And then again, when you're taking your daily actions, it's very intentional. It's not just by happenstance. It's actually you're acting on the things that are helping you achieve your goals. Does that
Mhm.
make sense?
Yeah, wow. Thanks for breaking it down with the example and everything. It makes it so clear as well. And yeah, I really like this book called The One Thing that I think could be a good framework to be thrown in there at some point as well, which goes like, what's the one thing I can do that would make, everything else easier or unnecessary, right? So, what's the one thing I can do to, advance this research of getting a new revenue management software. Was the one thing I could do today that would make everything else easier or not necessary. But to your point, it has to come from having done that exercise of where do you want to go, what are the key areas of focus, what are the key
Mhm.
tactics. I really like how you broke that down. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's awesome. uh,
Yeah.
well, listen, Stacy, this has been great. I could keep you here for 2 more hours, and we would probably have 2 more hours worth of interesting things to say and learn from your background. Any final, words of advice, words of wisdom, any final thoughts just to wrap it up that come to mind as you are, thinking about the impact you're trying to have. One question I didn't ask, which I guess I'll throw out there, is you do a lot of work specifically for women, so I want to get your thoughts as well on why do you think that it is important for you to essentially do something unique for women. What is it about women that makes you feel like this is a cause that at the end of the day makes sense? I've interviewed a lot of people in this industry, and you're right. I mean, there's a lot of women in this space. At the same time, maybe there are things historically speaking and whatnot where maybe in the corporate world, the whole like salary, equality of salary thing, maybe it's just a personality thing where maybe women are less traditionally willing to ask for more, right? It's not that they have less skills or whatever, maybe it's just a matter of like the mindset. Anyway, what is it for you that makes this be a cause that's so close to your heart? And if we
Yeah.
can, wrap up with that, I think that'd be a
Yeah.
great way to end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the answer may not be as thrilling as you want it to be, but I will share with you. I actually was just saying this to someone else earlier today. I do business with men all the time, right? My clients are men. Um, I have a whole household full of men, okay? I have nothing against guys. Like, I love having a conversation with you. Nothing against guys. I also don't subscribe to a scarcity mindset about women. So it is not about like, women deserve more and you should be better and it's nothing about that. It simply goes back to joy. Like, it really lights me up internally to help another woman. I don't know why. I don't know why, but the strategies that I talk about, the strategies we just talked through have that can apply to any gender, has nothing to do with gender,
Right.
but my coaching practice, Where I love to spend my time is investing in other women. I don't really know the answer other than it is within my soul. I absolutely love it, and I choose to spend my time doing the things I love.
Where can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about the coaching options or anything else is in terms of following, the different podcasts and the community and whatnot, just so people
All
can,
the places, all
yeah,
the places.
all the places, yeah.
So, StaceySt.com is probably the best go-to place. With the book, we've just launched Live Big with Stacey.com, and, you can find all about the Live Big, frameworks and resources. We're having training and events and all kinds of fun stuff on, online on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, although I'm not as active on LinkedIn as I should be, but, I'm in all the places, hopefully. I'm not on TikTok very much, so don't go to TikTok looking for me.
Love it, Stacy. Thank you so much for your time, Stacy. This was great. It was great to have you on. I took some notes. Hope the audience did as well, and hope we'll see each other very soon. And thanks again for your time and generosity.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Talk soon.